So my name is Chinwar Puli. I'm the Vice President of Provider Development at Ignite Data, essentially overseeing our site network across the US, UK, Australia, and Germany. So before joining Ignite Data, I was at Epic for nearly 10 years, both on the implementation team and the consulting division, really focused on optimizing the usage of the system for clinicians. So essentially managing documentation workflows to make that process as efficiently as possible. A lot of overlap with our partners, especially our Epic partners at Ignite Data, just making sure that what the data we capture within the EHR is in a format that makes it as easy as possible for us to extract, collate, and then transmit using Ignite Data.
Hey, Carson Goff. I'm our Vice President of Account Management. For our sponsors. So I oversee all the sponsor relationships we have globally. Before joining Ignite Data, I've spent the last 15 plus years in the enterprise software space, 11 of those in health tech, specifically with lab data and analytics, which obviously aligns really well with a lot of the data points we're working with in the clinical trial space.
So what's really exciting from my perspective is over the last couple of years, joining in 2023, starting to have those conversations with sites across the country. Initially, the question was, what is EHR to EDC? Who is Ignite Data? What exactly are you guys contributing to the clinical research ecosystem? Now, fast forward 2 years later, the conversation's completely changed. People ask more so, completely understand what EHR to EDC is, how can we get it instituted at our particular organization, in particular going through kind of the InfoSec and privacy steps, and also why Ignite Data versus all the other solutions that have popped up, which quite frankly to me is exciting because it reminds me a lot of even the journey at Epic, where initially no one really knew what EHRs were, and then overnight it seemed there were plenty of solutions that organizations had to pick between. So the fact that there's a lot of competition in this space now, to me, is music to my ears because it means that we're onto something.
Why it's really exciting at Ignite Data right now is there are a lot of different aspects of healthcare technology that are coming together at the right time. And what I mean by that is a short few years ago, back in even 2018 and 2019, what Ignite Data is accomplishing and executing on now wasn't possible. It wasn't possible without smart on fire technology. It wasn't possible with all of the EHR adoption that Chin talked about that's happened over the last 10 to 15 years. So now is the time where cloud technology, spinning up fire servers, and now executing on something that's been talked about for over a decade on streamlining how data is moved from these source systems and the Epics and Cerns of the world to the systems that our sponsor customers are leveraging to do the analysis and ultimately get these drugs to market. So with all of these things coming together at one time, the market is so ripe for what we're bringing to the table. And being a part of that right now is pretty exciting because we're not necessarily pushing this to the market. It's actually being pulled from both sides, both our site partners as well as our sponsor partners. There's a need, there's a thirst, there's a hunger, and that's something that we're filling right now. So it's really fun to be a part of because you're seeing everybody kind of singing from the same songbook.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned being pulled from multiple directions. I feel like the exciting part in our roles, Carson, between you and I is we kind of assist with that connective tissue between the site and the sponsor, because it's not like we're just asking for or just need adoption from one end. In order for the perfect fit to occur, you have a site that's highly engaged on leveraging technology to kind of reduce the burden of this manual data process right now, how it exists today. But also you have a commercial portfolio that warrants the solution for the tech. So that's the part that on a day-to-day basis we're kind of managing these two buckets. And it's a very delicate ecosystem, but to me it's exciting to be able to play a role in that delicate framework.
So Chin, the commercial portfolio and essentially like what our sponsors have already invested in is what now they're trying to reap the rewards and make the impacts for patients. So over the last 5 to 10 years, tons of investments have been made for these new molecules, and many of those are advancing as they get to a phase 2 or a phase 3. And now the question is, how fast can we get this drug to market? So again, the need of what are the other solutions in the marketplace that can take us from where we're at today, eliminate a lot of the waste, eliminate a lot of the redundancies that we have today, and get us the data information we need so we can prove to the FDA that this drug is going to make an impact for patients. And that's right where we're at right now with these huge portfolios that have this gaping hole and gaping need for how do we fill up the data pipeline to prove the efficacy of what we're working on.
Couldn't agree more, Carson. I think that's the really exciting part when you see the sponsor interest behind the technology. To reciprocate on the site side, you have some of it is born out of challenges, right? You have turnover, right? Remote work has never been more ubiquitous, so you have options for staff members that want to do a job that only requires a laptop and moving data, for instance. You also have high turnover because of that. So if it's a monotonous process that a site has to train staff to go through, and you can only get 12 to 18 months from a staff member before they move on to a different position, anything that can alleviate that is huge, both from a cost standpoint and a continuity standpoint. So I feel like one of the things with EHR to EDC that isn't talked about often in the first breath is just that quality of life for your clinical research coordinators, so that as they're running studies, they can operate at the top of their license and they can go through a day-to-day where they're not just getting burnt out looking at spreadsheets or copying a screen over from their EHR, over from Epic, over from Cerner into the EDC exactly how it exists in its source state.
Yeah, so we're building on what was the great resignation of all these investments that our site partners are making into these critical roles. Clinical research coordinators are at the center of everything that happens within a clinical trial. But yeah, as we've had conversations with sites, right, they're talking about sometimes 50, 60, 70, 80% turnover. Why? Job satisfaction. They weren't hired just to manually transmit data from one system to another. So getting and seeing that job level satisfaction from our customers is again, it's almost like it's this ancillary thing, to your point, that nobody's talking about, but it's there, it's real, and we've seen the retention continue to go up from our customer base, which is a really big thing for them, because we all know HR and recruiting it's necessary, but man, it's expensive, and so contributing to that job satisfaction is a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you need the end users impacted by this. I'll focus on the site side from my perspective, to be pushing a solution in order to actually get adoption, right? You can have a great tool, but if operational staff at a site doesn't want to use it, it's not easy to use, it's not going to go anywhere. So what's exciting for me now is we have live studies that have been run using the tool. There's no restriction where, if you activate Ignite data for a study, in theory, the staff can continue doing their manual process if it's too cumbersome to use. And we're not seeing any signs of that, which to me is really, really exciting. Because in my past life in the EHR industry, one of the items you have to watch shortly after go live is, are staff continuing to do their workflows in a legacy format, using paper or somehow going outside of the system. To see the end user satisfaction surveys around preferring to use a tool that can make their lives easier, to me just means that we're onto something. So the next challenge, because I know you asked this, Carson, around what the next challenge that I see is really adoption at scale. So we're working with some of the largest academic medical centers in the country today, and in a lot of ways that's proving that, okay, this works, there's a need. As we bring on more sites, Carson, you have ammunition, you have incentive for sponsors to jump on board. And at some point, this whole thing is just going to continue to tip, where sponsors want to bring more and more studies, sites have to keep up, sites want to adopt at an aggressive pace, and now sponsors have to activate studies. That's where, to me, the fun begins. Because if this was still in a stage, EHR to EDC across the industry, where we're trying to prove out if there's even demand, that's a very different conversation. Now it's just choosing how to essentially leverage all of the demand that there is in a way that is quality, scalable, doing it one step at a time in the right way.
Chin, when I joined Ignite Data last fall, the notion in the industry was that if you could get one site and one study up and running, like that was success in EHR to EDC. But you and I know the reality is most of these studies are global studies that are likely leveraging hundreds of different sites across the country. And being the first organization that's actually executing on getting these to dozens and dozens of sites and the impact that's making on the overall study is a really big deal, because it hasn't been done until Ignite Data is now executing on that with both our site and sponsor partners. So it's a big deal, and I think to what we talked about earlier, the tides are shifting here, and now we're at that spot where we have this incredible opportunity to become the standard EHR to EDC solution across the globe.
Yeah. I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because one of the items that I should very much emphasize is early on, a couple years back, even those sites that were excited to use EHR to EDC technology, we're talking more along the lines of a mirror study, a pilot, one study with one sponsor to prove efficacy, or an IIT for that matter. And now a lot of that work quickly shifts as soon as that kind of trust has been established. You don't want to just kind of piecemeal one or two studies. You want to at least plan for entire portfolios to be moved onto this technology, because your staff are very quickly going to say, hey, this is great for study A, how come we can't use it for B, C, D, E, and F? And so for us from the site side to be able to drive some of that excitement to our incredible pharma partners, to basically say sites are ready to adopt. And in fact, in a lot of ways, because resources are so scarce now between funding cuts and the turnover problem that we mentioned before, they don't have time to waste. So the sooner that we see this scalability, I think the more excitement that we're just going to continue to see. So when we reference scalability from a site perspective, so Ignite Data owns the install with a site, takes care of what we call the initial mapping, but there's an investment on the site, call it 15 to 20 hours. Once that initial deployment is complete, we don't charge the site for the integration and the leverage. We don't charge the site for the use of Archer for commercial studies. And I know you can elaborate on this, Carson, with how you work with pharma partners. So after the initial deployment, we want that site to maximize how much ROI they see on a study-by-study basis. Because if we can bring 10, 15, 20 studies down the line in the immediate future, the actual study-by-study effort from a site continues to decrease from a set of hours down to 1 to 2. And so when you look at staff and training, oftentimes you have the same CRCs managing multiple studies. So if they get trained onto Archer, the mapping is complete. Well, now all of a sudden, that's where you get that fun that fun example from a site basically saying, we want to leverage this for all of our studies. So Carson, could you talk a little bit about when you see a site, when I convey to you that a site is ready to scale, what's that conversation look like between you and a sponsor to get them invested into providing studies that scale for a site?
Yeah, well, it's funny you bring that up. I was just on the phone with one of our sponsors last week, and she talked about past technology implementations that sites simply would not adopt. And again, we talked a little bit about this push-pull, and the fact that she knows we already have most of the world-leading cancer centers on the planet that are adopting and are standardizing, that don't want to use any other technology but Ignite Data, because that's what's going to bring them scale. That's what's allowing the sponsors to come back and say, okay, I'm no longer at a shortage of sites to choose from. Every study is going to be a bit different in terms of the site and the partners they're looking for, but our scalability on the site side is what allows a sponsor to come and say, I want this entire portfolio of late-stage studies to be deployed on Archer, and that's what's going to start to. We've got many of the top 10 sponsors already using us right now, so that's what's going to bring us the scale, knowing we're going to be able to fill up that pipeline with our site partners.
Yeah, I think that's and that's a big differentiator between Ignite Data, right? When you have new entrants into this market, there's always this challenge of, can we get sites without having a sponsor agreement, or can we get sponsor agreements without having sites? Because the first question that a site will ask is, what sponsors are you working with? What studies do you have? And a first question that a sponsor will ask is, well, who's your site network? And so from our standpoint, the fact that we've been able to cultivate kind of these cornerstones with the top academic medical centers across the world, and now the top pharmaceutical partners across the world, when you ask about scalability, you have the building blocks in place where a site can go directly speak to our pharmaceutical partners and vice versa. And that, to me, is probably the most unique position that we're in when it comes to the market right now.
Well, like any hopeful hockey curve adoption, there's going to be that beginning stage where you've got your early adopters. The beautiful thing, we had those early adopters years ago. Now the rest of the market is trying to play catch up. And soon, if you're not adopting this technology, you're going to be a part of that laggard group that is falling behind and that is not accelerating, certain portfolios or entire portfolios of studies. So again, we're starting to see this self-fulfilling prophecy of, if you build it and you get a couple early adopters that have success, the rest will come, and that's coming to fruition right now.
When you hear about our site partners and our pharmaceutical partners speaking on stage about their relationship and their partnership with Ignite Data, one thing that stands out to me now is they're sharing live data that's being moved today. It's no longer just a vision. It's no longer around, hey, this is what we hope will happen. This is what's happening today. And so when you reference that hockey stick, Carson, for me, I'm seeing it firsthand with sites getting a little bit of that FOMO, realizing it's no longer, okay, we have a few years to kind of adapt if this technology is going to be right for us. They realize all of their peer institutions are either actively utilizing Ignite Data or another EHR to EDC, or are in advanced discussions. And so you have to at least engage and discuss how you can use this kind of technology in your clinical research department, because quite quickly, if it's not here already, this is becoming commonplace. We built an amazing culture at Ignite Data. It's probably one of the things that I'm most proud to contribute to. Before joining Ignite, as I mentioned, I spent 10 years at Epic, which was a wonderful experience. Epic's 12,000 people, deep from a home base in Verona standpoint. When I moved over to consulting, you're essentially jumping into just little pods, but they're temporary, right? And so with Ignite, I feel like it really does provide a family feel, because you realize you're in the foxhole with these other incredible professionals that there's no one else. There's no separate team that you kind of send an email to and then hope someone gets to it, or a different queue. You know exactly who's going to be in charge of finding a solution to a problem, and beyond that, you're invested in assisting everyone as they bring you those challenges. So to me, that's been a really, really tremendous experience. And beyond that, just from a geographical and kind of a diverse standpoint, I mean, we're located in, I think, 9 different countries across the world. The time zones, kind of the different cultural backgrounds, it makes for some really, really unique ways to solve problems. And also the conversations that we have, you're never gonna know what someone else is directly going to say, because all of our perspectives are so different in how we approach things.
That's great. So I had a unique opportunity to spend some time with a potential customer before I joined Ignite Data. And I'll just share, it was one of the largest couple pharmaceutical companies on the planet. And I got to listen to them about the gaps that they had, this massive challenge that they were looking to solve, and were trying to find the right partner. And they tried a partner that just couldn't deliver on the promise. And so now they were starting over to figure out, is Ignite Data the right place for us to move and put a lot of our eggs into this basket in the EHR to EDC world? So I can happily report they said yes, and they're going down that path with us. But what that means for us is this grand challenge that we are solving. And so one of the selling points for me was that I was truly baffled that in 2025, some of the largest organizations on the planet, some of the most profitable organizations on the planet, hadn't yet solved this challenge where they were still manually transcribing data from one system to the next. And I didn't believe it at first. But after that phone call, it was hours of phone calls within 1 week, I was sold that we have the solution, we have the keys to unlocking and solving this challenge for all these companies that are going after the same thing, which is likely making a positive impact for people that we love, like our friends, our family, that are dealing with either chronic disease or some cancer that may have not been solved, or where there wasn't a therapeutic that worked for your loved one. So the fact that we're all around the table working together is what makes this company so special. And Chin mentioned this earlier, being that connective tissue from the world-leading researchers to the world-leading drug makers, and bringing that all together is just something that I don't think you're going to find anywhere else. So it makes it really special to be here, and it makes you fired up every single morning you get up knowing we're going to go solve this challenge, and we have the opportunity to make a difference for millions of lives. Pretty cool thing. That's the pitch. That's why people need to come work at Ignite Data.
Yeah, I think if someone was asking on any side of the aisle, from a pharmaceutical standpoint or from a site standpoint around why Ignite Data, I say this on a lot of calls when I meet with sites, don't take our word for it. Speak to our peers, speak to those that are working with us actively, because they'll give you a transparent review of Ignite Data so that you don't just have to hear it from us. And beyond everything else, we take that feedback incredibly seriously. I know there's a lot of former athletes, myself included, on the team, where the best way to improve is through failure and by learning. And so we have the relationships. I can speak personally on the site side, where I meet monthly with a lot of our top partners, and I want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly to continue to improve. So we will always put transparency above everything else, and that credibility means everything to us. So if you don't want to hear it from me, you don't want to answer an email from Chin, that's no problem. We'd actually prefer you do your diligence, talk to everyone else in the industry first, and then reach out to me when you're ready.
So one of the things I know we're really excited about is coming up this weekend. We're hosting an event at ASCO. And Chin, you just talked about, don't take our word for it. Like, talk to our site partners, talk to our sponsors about the impact Ignite Data is making. And when you go to ASCO's got roughly 40 to 50,000 people that are attending it. So the top cancer centers and the top sponsors are constantly being solicited to come to our event, be at our event, show up. And the fact that we have a handful of the top cancer centers that are there on our behalf to host this event with us, I think speaks volumes for what we've delivered and the way we're managing those relationships, and ultimately delivering on the promise that they were hoping for when they contracted with Ignite Data.
One thing that we take pride in the provider development team at Ignite Data is none of us are from traditional business development. We've never done sales. We're all coming from more of a consulting or a project management or a technical deployment background. Several of us that have worked at EHR companies. And so when we meet with sites, we're not trying to sell them a solution. We're trying to fix their problems and trying to support them in solving these complex challenges by using technology. So it's a very translatable career pivot, in my opinion, from coming from a consulting background and joining our team. But one of the things that we always get told, especially by our site partners, is we never felt like we were being sold to, that we were in a sales presentation. We felt like we were in an operations pitch around, here are the challenges that we're envisioning that we can help support using Ignite Data.